So the Switch 2 has been out for a few months now, and opinions online are pretty divided. Despite having one of the most successful console releases in gaming history, there has been endless controversy embroiling Nintendo for the inflated prices, game keycards, updated EULAs giving them the right to assassinate your entire family, and much more. Nintendo has always been a greedy company, but it really feels like this greed has reached a different level as of late. They always seem to go through cycles where one console will be really successful, and then the next flops due to some stupid decisions they made because they got too comfortable. A perfect example of this is the Wii and the Wii U. The Wii was a breakout success, managing to capture the casual market that didn't really play games. And I suppose by the time of the Wii U, they expected to cruise by only on its predecessor's success, and you already know the shit show that followed. And thus, the cycle repeats. The Switch is extremely profitable, Nintendo gets a big head and decides, fuck the poor, Switch 2 games are $80 now. Games have been $60 for a long time. To suddenly racket the price up by 33% and have all of your competitors follow suit is pretty bad. And now all my fellow broke bitches have to miss out on DK Bonanza and the new Fire Emblem because I have this thing called medical debt. Like I said, Nintendo making stupid fucking decisions isn't new, but not everything appears to be business as usual here. You can see attitudes towards the company change and sour significantly at right around the time of the Palworld lawsuit. Now, as a disclaimer, I actually think Pocket Pair, the company that makes Palworld, is really shady, and if Nintendo was suing them on the basis of plagiarized character designs, I and most other people would probably be more understanding. I'm not someone who wants to glaze Palworld just because of a common enemy. In fact, I think those people are incredibly annoying. I guess I just wish the martyr wasn't fucking Palworld of all things, because they really don't deserve to be. But Nintendo wasn't suing them for character designs. They were suing them for gameplay mechanics. Particularly, writable mounts and the concept of summoning creatures to fight were patented by Nintendo, meaning that no one but them can use it. Patents are always dumb, but this is something else. These are so laughably generic and nondescript they could technically apply to half of all JRPGs on the market. There's a whole genre of games called monster collectors, and typically these get dismissed as being Pokemon clones because Pokemon is just the most well-known one, but you can't own a whole genre. Or I guess you can, because the law means nothing for anyone with enough money. Common, widely encompassing game mechanics will now give some greedy fuck-ass company run by human tapeworms the right to sue you and sacrifice your firstborn to an angry god. Needless to say, people were very unhappy, and that's really what lit most of the fire. But the thing to make it all rage out of control was the launch of the Switch 2. And you wouldn't really know it just from the official reveal. Feelings were positive for like 2 hours until people started putting the pieces together. Let's start with the most obvious one, the pricing. The console itself is more expensive, but this would all mostly be fine if the games weren't $80. After all, you only have to buy the console once, but when you keep having to buy games to continue getting use out of it, that repeated fee getting more expensive is a whole lot less forgivable. And yes, inflation is a factor, but that doesn't change that most people are poorer than they were a decade ago. Pricing for food and rent and other basic necessities have gone up drastically, and salaries haven't. Folks just can't afford to burn that kind of money at a moment's notice. There's also the introduction of game keycards. Some physical Switch 2 games aren't even actually physical. You buy the cartridge and put it in your console, and the cartridge lets you download the game onto the system. The card itself does nothing but act as a permission slip. I cannot emphasize enough how fucking dumb this is. You are literally getting the worst of both physical and digital media with none of the upsides of either. You still have to have the cartridge physically in the system anytime you want to play it, and hope your 5-year-old child doesn't hide it in the couch somewhere for you to never find it again. And you still have to worry about not owning your games because they're tied to Nintendo servers instead of being a physical thing in your house. It's all of the inconvenience of physical media with none of the security. What happens when Nintendo decides they don't want to keep the Switch 2 servers open anymore? Can I not buy certain new games for the system? What about people who don't have regular access to the internet? A term that shows up when talking about physical games is media preservation, and video games occupy a precarious space in this conversation. You can always write down what's in a book with any old piece of paper. Games require hardware tailored to them and properly functioning emulators in order to even access them at all, so preserving them becomes a whole lot harder. A concerning trend pops up when talking about the future of physical games. Microsoft, for example, has completely phased out physical media from the modern Xbox model entirely. The PlayStation 5 Pro doesn't even come with a fucking disc drive. You have to buy it separately, as though Sony thinks only a cave dweller from rural Arkansas might want it. What happens when digital storefronts shut down? What happens when one of these companies decides they don't want you playing that game anymore? Or if Nintendo decides to ban you from their servers? It's concerning because a company can decide to just take shit from you that you already paid for whenever they feel like it. And the digital-only landscape is also disastrous for used game stores and anyone looking to buy a pre-owned game on a budget. Soon, you may no longer be able to wait a few months after a game's release to get it for a bargain at your local game store. And while sales on digital storefronts exist, Nintendo practically never puts their games on sale. It's so bad that even old Wii games are still being repackaged and sold for $50, $60, even $70. Just look at the Switch ports for Skyward Sword or Super Mario Galaxy 2. And it's not like it's even better for the environment like digital games, because it still comes in a physical cartridge with a case, and also the ugliest packaging I've ever seen. This feels like I uninstalled Adblock on accident. And the final big stickler is the game chat. The Switch 2's new major gimmick is a game chat feature, giving you the option to voice chat with other players if you hit the game chat button on the Joy-Con. Here's the problem with that. You have to pay a subscription to use one of the physical buttons on your controller that you already paid for. Nintendo is so determined to nickel and dime their fanbase that they're trying to trick you into paying for something Discord already does for free by making it visible at all times on the controller. A common thread with all of this is that gaming as a hobby becomes more and more expensive and, therefore, inaccessible for people as time goes on. We do not live in the same world we did 10 years ago. People don't have the same kind of disposable income. Paying for basic necessities becomes more and more of a struggle. And yet, despite that, the Switch 2 is selling astonishingly well. It's had one of the most successful console releases of all time. And that's insane to me, because I didn't think the Switch 2 looked very appealing. A lot of people didn't. I couldn't buy it because I'm a fucking peasant. I really do mean it when I say that if it wasn't for cheap indie games and piracy, I would be forced to give up my hobby just because I can't afford $80 games in this hell world of an economy. It certainly doesn't seem like the Switch 2 had a lot of appeal for casual markets, at least with the people I know in real life, because everyone I know who would otherwise get a game console for their kids or something is seeing how overpriced it is and would rather just stick with the consoles they have, so it's probably not just an internet echo chamber. And I think the answer lies in the popularization of Nintendo and games as a medium within the Switch 1's lifespan. The people buying the Switch 2 are most likely core dedicated Nintendo fans, and the spike in sales is simply because there are more Nintendo fans now. A lot more, even. And those people have decided they want to buy the next Nintendo console no matter what. As someone who cares a whole lot about the medium of video games, I find it extremely concerning the trends Nintendo is working to cement. Obviously, Nintendo isn't the first to do these things, and arguably Microsoft and Sony are just as bad or even worse about it depending on your perspective. But Nintendo doing it, to me, signals a turning point. Physical games, which used to be the standard, are now falling by the wayside and will likely die out entirely in the next couple of console generations, and even that timeline is being exceedingly generous. The standard price for games has gone up. You get charged extra for things you just took for granted as being a part of the upfront price of the console, such as access to online servers, and all within a less secure format than before. And now that every big AAA company that has actual control over the market is doing it, consumers are forced to just deal with it. There are no other alternatives, at least not ones that would appeal to average people. I think it's pretty safe to say you are not going to be buying a Steam Deck for your 8-year-old son. And just so we're clear, I'm not trying to shame people for buying Nintendo products. It's your money, you do whatever the hell you want with it. You ever see that one Sonic meme that's like, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism? Yeah, none of us have any right to start judging because someone bought a thing that made them happy, because it's just inherent to how our society works. But I do want people to think about whether they actually want the latest console or big AAA release, or if it's just FOMO making them think that they do. Because the reason companies like Nintendo keep doing this shit and getting away with it is because people will still keep buying it anyway until they're not able to anymore. Obviously, a boycott is never going to work because gamers are the most spineless demographic on this planet. They'll complain on Reddit for 5 hours a day about how you're a chud for buying the Switch 2, and then their next post is them waiting outside the local GameStop at midnight, their mother's credit card brandished in hand like a righteous holy sword. I suppose the question becomes, where will things go from here? Call it cope all you want, but I'm still not fully convinced that the success of the Switch 2 is a done deal. If you're a core dedicated Nintendo fan, you're probably more likely to buy the Switch 2 as close to release as you can, whereas someone more casual might just pick it up a few years down the line. You can try to attract casual audiences all you want, but if you make it unattainable for people living in a struggling economy, people are going to choose to pay for the week's groceries and not fucking Mario Kart. Maybe we're not in a bad enough spot for that to really be a major factor in sales, and people who buy gaming consoles are just richer than I thought. I don't know. But Nintendo has always defined itself by casual, family-friendly appeal, and I think that's the thing I find confusing about the Switch 2. It has no casual appeal. When all of the core fans have bought the new system, where does that leave everyone else? It's worth noting that a likely part of the reason the Switch 2 has been so successful is just due to supply. The Switch's sales were more sustained over time because they didn't anticipate it selling so much and didn't make enough consoles for release, so people were forced to buy it over a long period of time. I don't foresee the Switch 2 being quite as sustained. Not to mention, over here in America, we have the threat of tariffs looming over. People are likely foreseeing that they should get it now before it gets more expensive. This all potentially points to overwhelmingly front-loaded sales that simply burn out. A perfect example of why release sales don't always equate to long-term success is the Wii U or the 3DS. The Wii U actually sold really well for the first few months, but again, this is likely just because those were core fans who were always going to buy it. After that, it drops off a cliff like an anvil on Tom's head, because nobody else gave a shit about it. It was overpriced with a piss-poor library and confusing marketing to boot. And then you look at the 3DS, which was a bit of a failure at first because it had no games and, once again, was just expensive. After the price drop, you can see sales go up drastically because the reduced price actually made it appealing to people. And people love the 3DS now. It's considered to be one of Nintendo's best consoles. Tears of the Kingdom, which is a game that I adore and all of the haters are simply wrong, was outpacing Breath of the Wild's release sales for a while before dropping off. Now, Breath of the Wild is selling more because it isn't $70. Now, of course, the Switch 2 is still new, so it doesn't have that many exclusives yet, but it's off to a very strong start, so maybe it will see long-term success. Whatever Nintendo does, other companies will follow. That's just how it is when you're the most influential video game company on the planet. And seeing whether the Switch 2 fails or not is something that fascinates me because of that influence. It's possible that the Switch 2 will see unprecedented success, Nintendo learns they can keep ripping off customers, and fully begins to live up to their reputation as Japanese Disney, just getting greedier and greedier until they become a creatively bankrupt, hollowed-out, dispassionate shell churning out slop game after slop game because it makes them more money than actually putting effort into something. Or they get a wake-up call, realize they're pricing out the rest of the market, and are forced to start giving a shit again. Or considering their current leadership obviously doesn't give a fuck about the art form, maybe they'll just fade into obscurity. As AAA games become more unattainable, I really have to wonder about what people will turn to once they simply can't afford to waste money on it anymore. It's possible that you lose the casual market completely, and gaming goes back to being a niche thing that only hobbyists really engage with. Maybe indies will take over. After all, they're cheap and usually not as demanding for your PC to run. Hollow Knight Silksong, for example, a game with a team consisting of 3 Australian men and a half-eaten donut, has been absolutely teabagging large companies with its sheer aura, and people are really starting to realize in recent years that gaming can be way better when you don't have a billionaire CEO breathing down your neck. And that is, by the way, a game that I will probably do a video on at some point once I stop being fucking lazy. I do want to make it clear, I don't think we're fully cooked just yet. We don't know where things will go from here. One thing is obvious, and it's that there will always be ways around this stuff. Whether that means emulation or indie games or finally playing your backlog that's been staring at you for the past 5 years, you worthless goon, you're probably never going to run out of cool new stuff to play. This video will probably age like the avocados in the back of your fridge. I will now proceed to throw myself into the ocean.